you love the game as much as we do, go with the Shaw Roasted Breaks Up with exclusive interviews, game day features, and more.
With Cash for Life, every week can be a new experience.
Think next week will be even more fun?
Could not be. With Cash for Life, you could win $1,000 week after week after week. Play now, win for life. Closed captioning of this program is brought to you in part by the 2015 Toyota Clear Out event. Great offers on many 2015 models are now at your local Toyota dealer. You're watching the News Hour on Global Toronto.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining this consultation on RNAO governance. I want to thank you all for taking the time. You clearly are very committed given the Blue Jays do-or-die game that's on, so thank you very much. So this evening we have an hour, and I want to begin by giving you a little bit of background on the governance changes and the process that has led up to this and our reason for consulting this evening. So back in 2012, the Board of Directors actually struck the governance subcommittee to examine our governance model and to look at the literature on governance best practices, to look at other similar board models that may have evolved over time for associations like our own. And we recognize the need to do this because the current structure of the Board of Directors has actually been in place for at least 4 decades. And back then, RNAO had a much smaller staff and more limited scope and capacity. So clearly in the last 40 years, there's been a lot of change, and it was felt to be timely to undertake this governance review. The member-at-large positions were originally created for the purpose of focusing on specific domains of practice, and once again, when there was much less capacity at home office. And today, our association enjoys a staff of 90 full-time employees and robust capacity in all domains of nursing and organizational performance. So the purpose of the consultation process that we've been undertaking is really threefold. First of all, we want to inform you, our members, of some possible considerations that we can look at as a membership in terms of updating and building greater capacity in our board. Secondly, we want to gather your feedback. It's really important that we hear from you, our members, because any changes that will happen, we want to be shaped by you, and of course, actually will constitute a bylaw change for the board. So this actually then would be defined, we would need to define motions based on the consultation and your feedback and thoughts, and then we will bring these motions forward to one member, one vote at our 2016 AGM in May of next year. Now, I do want to clarify that these governance consultations are actually to inform the development of the board motion regarding governance and the related bylaws. The decision to accept a specific governance model and the related bylaws that would make that governance change will be made by one member, one vote, based on the outcome of that, not this consultation process that's been underway since the summer. This is simply, but importantly, an opportunity to get your feedback and really shape the motions and corresponding bylaws. Okay? So in terms of the consultations to date, I'll just give you a little look back where we've had 7 to date, one as recently as yesterday. So you can see we've been at this for a while now, and we've gotten some really thoughtful feedback, some excellent questions, and you'll see in a few minutes how we're actually incorporating that into our consultations and evolving some options that we want your thoughts on this evening. So I'd like to move now to really the main elements or focus of our consultations. And I want to do this fairly systematically. I want to begin by highlighting and reminding you what our current structure is. I want to talk about the proposed change that the board is bringing forward for your thoughts, and then some thinking, albeit early thinking, around the process that could be used for actually implementing each of these changes, should that be the direction that the association wishes to go in. So let me begin then by talking about the member-at-large positions. In our current structure, we have 5 member-at-large positions on our board, and these encompass the domains of expertise that are listed on the screen: administration, education, nursing practice, research, and socio-political affairs. Now, the proposed change that is out for consultation is considering actually incorporating the MAL domain expertise into the regional representative role. And so the regional representative would then be on the board with both a geographic responsibility as well as a particular domain of expertise in nursing and organizational performance. So that's really one of the proposed changes. And in terms of the process, what we would consider is the criteria for the actual regional representatives would be defined to include both general skills, so there may well be regional representatives who would come on with a sort of a generalist skill set, but we would also look at regional representatives who would have those domain-specific skills drawn out of the MAL role and incorporated into the regional representative. And as part of this process, we, of course, would want to ensure that there was a rotation from region to region at each election in order to add that geographic diversity as well. So that's a little sense of how that proposed change could look. As a result of this, the next change, which is fairly self-evident if we were to go in this direction, would be that the 5 member-at-large positions that are currently on the board would be removed. And the process for doing that in order to ensure a continuity and a smooth transition would be that we would propose that we continue with the regularly scheduled election for 2016, but that the MAL position would come on as a 1-year term as opposed to a 2-year term. So that just gives you a sense of how we could look at the change of MAL into regional representatives and then deleting the MAL. The next area under consideration relates to student representation. Currently, we do not have a student representative on the board, and the proposal for your consideration is the addition of a student representative. Once again, the process for this would be through 1 member, 1 vote at our upcoming AGM. The next area looks at public representation. As you know, we currently do not have a public representative on the board, and proposed by our current board of directors is the possible addition of a public representative. Both of these areas, the addition of a student and the addition of public representation, have emerged as best practice in governance today. So both of these, once again, would be decided through 1 member, 1 vote. Another area that we are proposing is the addition of an interest group chair. Currently on our board, we have 1 interest group chair, and that interest group chair has an incredibly large role, and that is representing 30 interest groups, very busy interest groups, and who are all doing incredibly important work. And so currently, that's a pretty daunting task to remain connected with all of those groups. So the proposal is the addition of an interest group chair representative, and this would then put a total of 2 of those representatives on the board, and this would be decided, once again, through 1 member, 1 vote. The final area of change being proposed relates to the term of office for Board of Directors. Currently, it is a 2-year term on the board with the option of 1 2-year term renewal. We are proposing that we look at changing that to 1 3-year term on the Board of Directors. And the thinking here is that it often takes a year to really become familiar with your role and function on the Board of Directors, to get comfortable with, the proceedings of the board and so on. And so part of the thinking, and in looking at other boards as well, is that with a 3-year term, you actually get that 1 year to begin to consolidate your knowledge and skills and your comfort level, and then you have 2 years to really galvanize that and move forward with solid contributions on the board. In this instance, there would not be a renewal of that term. And in terms of process, in order to make this happen, it would need to be transitioned during the 2017 call for nominations, because a change of term, as you can appreciate, to ensure both some continuity of experienced members and bringing on others, new membership, we would want to ensure that we didn't destabilize the board, so we would look at this happening during the 2017 call for nominations. So that really, in a nutshell, are the areas that we're considering and have out for consultation. Now, you have the benefit, being, I guess, number 8 in terms of your participation, of getting a little glimpse of what we've heard to date from the consultations that we've been undertaking. And this is just some highlights. It is in no way a comprehensive analysis, but rather we wanted to highlight for you things that have emerged as themes. So these have been mentioned on probably most, if not all, of the consultations. And it just gives you a sense of how your member colleagues are reacting to some of these proposed changes and some really important questions that we've been asked. And we've been able to go back to the governance subcommittee with these, and it has allowed us to, as I say, in real time, kind of incorporate some of these thoughts and feedback into some possible options that I'm going to show you in a few minutes. So let's go back to the top then in terms of removal of the MAL position. So we have been asked once again, because this does mean removing a position from the board, and so it's understandable that members want to be very clear on what it is we're hoping to achieve by actually removing these member-at-large positions. And so, I have gone over that explanation in terms of the evolution in strength at our home office in all of those domain areas, whether you're talking about policy or administration. So it is really related to that. And so I have explained that again, and people have mixed thoughts on that, but we'll hear your thoughts in a few minutes. There has been concern voiced, particularly with the loss of a couple of these, one relating to socio-political affairs, and the other specifically relating to the MAL for education. And in addition to that, there has been concern raised that if we were to integrate these 2 roles, MAL and regional representative, that it actually may be just too large a role for people to take on. So that is a theme that has emerged. In looking at student representation, I can tell you that this addition has been overwhelmingly supported. I can't think of any comments made with respect to that, not supporting the addition of this, particularly given the important role that students play in the association now and looking at the future of our profession moving forward. So very strong support for this. We have been asked in the consultation, or it has been mentioned, the importance of ensuring the student is mentored by the other members on the board, so that the student coming on is absolutely able to take full opportunity of being a board of director member and also feeling very valued and confident in making their contributions. So the importance of mentorship, really key. In addition to that, we have been asked, although it isn't noted on this slide, we've been asked about how we might go about selecting that representative, and we'll share some of those suggestions in a few slides from now. In looking at the public representative, I can tell you that this particular change has met with mixed reviews, I would say, mixed reaction. Some extremely supportive of this, given the movement of, not that it's new, but there's certainly, particularly in this government mandate, with patient-centered care, patients and clients at the heart of all we do, the emphasis on accountability and transparency, and so we have had some very supportive of this and recognizing this as best practice. Other members not so supportive, wondering once again the purpose of adding a public representative to the board, voicing some concern about a public representative potentially lobbying the board, depending on their particular area of interest. So that was raised. A comment made, or more than one comment made, that we should ensure, if this is the direction the membership goes in, that this public representative not always come from a large urban center like Toronto. And finally, that there would be a process to ensure that a public rep be absolutely nonpartisan, so not coming on with any particular political agenda. And finally, in the area of interest group chair representative, I can say overwhelmingly support for the addition of another position. So much support that we've had suggestions that we actually bring on 2 more interest group representatives. There is absolutely recognition that with the growing number of interest groups and the amount of work that's going on in the interest groups and the desire to be able to enhance the connectivity between the board and the work of the interest groups, that certainly lots of interest in this. So not only adding 1, but a theme emerging that would we consider adding 2 for a total of 3. Another area that's come up is some really interesting suggestions and, of course, questions about how we might consider moving forward in operationalizing this if we were to have 2 or even 3, how we might look at the division of the interest groups across 3 representatives. So how would it be sort of clustering interest groups that have complementary areas of focus? Would we do it by where the interest group chairs happen to be coming from in terms of parts of the province, and just how we might look at parceling out 2 or in fact 3 interest group reps with 30 some odd interest groups. So some interesting suggestions that came up that we might consider if this is the direction the membership ends up going. And then another area that is a little different than the actual board composition relating to term limits. Members are, to date on the consultations, are quite split about this. Some feeling that a two-term limit with the option to renew is good, feeling that it does give you a chance, if you're finding it too much, that you can actually go after 2 years, and life changes, and sometimes when you came on the board, life isn't the same at the end of 2 years, and you then can go off. On the other hand, if people are really enjoying their 2 years and are just finally feeling that they're really able to make a strong contribution, they can then let their name stand for a second 2-year term. So some supporting the status quo. Others very much supporting the change to a 3-year term. Feeling, once again, the rationale that that first year is really good to come on in a more novice way and then begin to build your expertise and contribute in the last 2. Others voicing concern that 3 years is a long time to commit to any board. So just some thoughts that we've heard. Some concerns about how this would affect the size of the board, meaning changing the various numbers of positions, just wondering, will it make the board a lot smaller or a lot larger in terms of unwieldy in size? And so we've been able to reassure them that the difference in board size is only between 2 and 3 positions, so it isn't going to change us in a big way at all. And another area that was raised is wanting reassurance that the Board of Directors will continue to serve the needs of nurse practitioners. And of course, we were able to reassure the members who have raised this that absolutely, in fact, there are always spots. We have nurse practitioners on our board currently, and there will always be opportunities through any sort of board election process for nurse practitioners to come on the board, as they are now, and always will have that opportunity. So that's, in a nutshell, what we've heard. I do now want to give you an opportunity to get some, to just kind of run through a couple of the options that we've taken this feedback into shaping, and then I'm going to open up the lines to hear your thoughts and feedback. But we weren't able to do this early on, but now that you're at number 8, we can actually kind of show you more comprehensively what some of these options, based on the feedback, could look like. So, of course, status quo is always an option, and that is one that will go out for one member, one vote, because it may well be that, notwithstanding the work that's been done, members may absolutely like the way it is, and that will go out as an option. A second option is one that really, if all the changes that the current Board of Directors is putting out for consultation now, if all of those changes were to come into place, this is what our Board of Directors would look like in the future. And this is what we're considering option B. So the board would have a president and a president-elect or past president in even years, and then it would include, as you can see on the screen, adding a student representative, adding a public representative, adding one additional interest group chair, so there'd be a total of 2, deleting the MAL roles currently, there are 5, incorporating then the domains of expertise of member-at-large roles into the regional representative roles, and then changing the office term from 2 years to 3 years with no renewal. And once again, currently the term is 2 years, and there is an opportunity to renew for one time for 2 years. Okay, so that would be considered option B. That's what it would look like if all of the proposed changes were to be approved in one member, one vote. We also have now an option C that we didn't have at the beginning. So option C, based on some of the feedback, would look like this. We would have a president and president-elect or past president given the year. And then we would have a student representative coming onto the board, and one of the suggestions we heard could be that this student representative could be recruited from the nursing students of Ontario. So it could be the chair, for example. And currently, we don't have a student rep. Incorporation of one public representative would be in this model, and one of the possibilities could be that the public representative could be appointed from Patients Canada. And this would be, of course, from Ontario as the provincial jurisdiction, and that was absolutely needing to be reassured by some of the members who were supportive of this, but just wanting to know that given that Patients Canada is a national group, that we would ensure that it would be from Ontario. Incorporating not only one, but in this model, the difference from B is that this model looks at incorporating 3 additional interest group chair representatives. Currently, there is one, so you can see in this model we've taken that suggestion and shaped the model differently. This would still result in the deletion of MAL roles, and those MAL role responsibilities, domains of expertise, incorporated into the regional representative roles. Into the interest group representative roles. So in this model, it is being integrated into interest group representative roles. So if you look at that, some possible scenarios could be we could have 2 MAL interest groups for clinical practice domains, as an example, and then 1 MAL interest group for the functional domains of administration, education, and research. But we could also sort of mix that up in a variety of combinations. We could have only 1 MAL for clinical practice and then 2, and we could divide up administration and education and research across those 2. So there are different combinations that we could play with there. And then in this particular option, we would also be proposing the change of office term limits from 2 years to 3 years with no renewal. And you can see there it's currently 2 years. Okay, so I now would like to bring this back now to you in this consultation number 8 to hear your thoughts on this. What you feel about any one of the changes, and I think more specifically how you feel about these options as we've laid those changes out for you. So we'll now open the lines and love to hear your thoughts. One thing I will let you know just in terms of how we will do this. When you have a question, if you could type your name into the bottom right-hand corner, that's great, on the right-hand corner of your screen, and you'll come into the queue, and we'll certainly address you that way, or you're absolutely able to ask your question over the phone, and Home Office staff will say your name, and you'll have about you'll have a minute to ask your question, and then I will respond. Okay? I know it's a lot of information to absorb in a few minutes. So we're certainly we have lots of time for you to think about it and welcome any thoughts, suggestions, questions.
So we have someone asking how many participants on there are there, I believe, for this specific webinar. We have about 20. We have about 20 tonight, and it varies based on the time and based on the day, so that's why we've kind of varied when we're holding these webinars. If you're more comfortable typing your question, you can type your question and then I'll read it out loud to Carol. Or you can just type in your name and then we'll ask you to speak into the phone, and you can do it that way. So we have a question, what do current board members say about changing from 2 + 2 to 3? I believe that's the 2-year term plus another 2 years to one single 3-year term.
So thank you for that question. I think in a nutshell, the board really felt it was important to put this out to the broader membership because ultimately, given that this will be a bylaw change, it really matters what the entire board feels about this. Certainly, I can share to date, as I said, it is a mixed review. We have heard from some member colleagues, not who are currently on the board, but rather member colleagues who have served on the board previously. And once again, it varies. Some see a lot of wisdom in moving to 1 3-year term. Others have articulated that that may be a long time to commit to the board and that it could result in some difficulty recruiting to the board. So we have actually heard quite balanced views, I can honestly say, about changing the proposal to change the term from 2 2-year terms to 1 3-year term. In terms of the work of the governance subcommittee, we can say that there are a number of boards who have made this change over time, and their experience when we did do an environmental scan on this, their experience has been that people actually have enjoyed the 3-year term. They didn't note any undue attrition from the board with people not able to commit to the 3-year term. But once again, I think it's very situational. So that's why the term of office, it's really important that a bylaw change that would make this change go out to 1 member, 1 vote.
So we have a comment. The comment is in support of the 3-year limit, and this member comments that they see the same faces over and over, and this might force or encourage others to participate.
All right. Thank you for that comment. Yes, it is something certainly that would could result in a broader engagement of members who want to step up and serve on the board. That's certainly a possible outcome. Appreciate that comment.
We have another comment that the presentation was very well outlined, and a member thanking you, Carol.
Well, thank you very much. Once again, it is the work of a bigger committee and lots of good thinking, and in fact, the incorporation of great suggestions and thinking as well from our membership. So I can't take full credit for it, but I really do appreciate that feedback, because we're certainly open to anything we can do to make things clearer or to improve the process. But thank you so much for that comment.
Here we have a comment, and this is from this comment is, having served on the board for 2 consecutive terms, the 4th year can be tiring pending the work that has transpired over the previous 3 years.
All right. Thank you for that comment. These are all very, very helpful, and I can tell you that comments and questions, we are really carefully documenting and synthesizing these, and they absolutely will be going back in terms of member feedback. So your comments are all very, very welcomed. And hearing the experience of people who have been on the board is particularly helpful.
Okay, we have another question. How did the proposed changes enhance member engagement at the chapter level? What about the LIN structure chapter representation?
Okay, so I think we have been asked about, in fact, as recently as the teleconference or the webinar yesterday, about, the whole sort of chapter and regional boundaries that delineate the organization of our members across the province. And the idea of kind of wiping the slate clean and starting to redraft those was not within the scope of this particular review. It was felt that, those are usually defined by population changes, and while not a perfect geographic delineation, it seemed to balance out. I know it can be very daunting for regional representatives to engage chapters, but we hadn't specifically talked about how these changes would actually enhance the member engagement at the chapter level. We have talked about how it would enhance engagement and connectivity at the interest group level, and given that many members at the chapter level and in the regions are also members of interest groups, I guess we're hoping that there will be that multiplier effect of people overall feeling more engaged and connected. And but in terms of that specific consideration, thank you for that question, and we can certainly take that back to our board. But we're also always open to suggestions. If you have some and want to email them in, that's another opportunity you will have. If you have some ideas of how chapter level engagement could be enhanced, we're always open to hearing that through the regional representatives. The other question is about the LIN structure. We were asked if there had been any thought given to redefining the regional and chapter boundaries along the 14 LIN boundaries, and that hasn't been entertained and had not been entertained. My thoughts on that is, at this point in time, as you probably know, the whole LIN Act is open for review and has been under active review for the past several months. So it'll be interesting to see if, in fact, there may be boundary changes within the LIN structure, quite frankly. So I don't think making that kind of change currently would be a good way to go in, but we're certainly going to take that question and suggestion back to the board and let them know that that was an input that we did get in terms of just some questions around redefining our regional boundaries and chapter delineation. Because I do know in parts of the province, some chapters and regions relate very neatly to the particular LIN boundary, and in other parts of the province, there's not good alignment at all. So it is quite a mixed picture. I do appreciate that question, though, and your thoughts.
Okay, so we have a comment. I like option C, but the MAL in socio-political affairs isn't captured. Each member does participate in socio-political actions, from action alerts to take your MPP to work. We also have a very strong policy home office support that assists us. That's a comment from a member.
All right. Thank you very much.
Okay, so this is a comment and question. Is the only purpose of the IG chairs to communicate? I have difficulty with the level of scrutiny from RNAO office. My experience with one IG is that there is no term of office limitation and no real effort to find replacements from all the members. If the IG chairs were more plentiful, would there be more oversight and problem detection?
My sense of the addition of more interest group chairs would be building capacity on the board to be able to support interest groups as they might like. I know some interest groups over the years have wanted a little bit of additional support. I have also heard that given some of the really rich work that happens at that interest group level, and oftentimes the information and work that can help to shape the policy actions of RNAO. There's incredible work that happens. So the interest group chair actually, currently does an amazing job bringing forward that through interest group reports to the board. But it's a challenge with 30 interest groups. So I think by and large, the desire was to have more interest group chairs, reps on the board, and therefore, just by virtue of more person power, be able to really reach out to individual interest groups to enhance communication and support, not to scrutinize or, give unhelpful oversight, but rather to give very supportive connectivity to interest groups, to be that channel to the full board of directors. So it's all intended to be much more helpful as opposed to scrutiny. Sometimes it can be, and it's unfortunate if it's seen as scrutiny, but sometimes it can be maybe reminders for interest groups to do their reporting, to submit their needs for their accountability back for the budgets that are allocated to interest groups, that kind of thing. So it's not meant to be unhelpful, but rather meant to really support the work of the interest groups. So that's the intent, I can tell you, in putting that forward. And we would hope that that would be seen as helpful with the interest groups. Yes.
We have a comment about the public rep. This member says, I agree with the public rep, but with a limit of 1 year of service.
All right. Thank you for that comment.
Okay, there's a comment. It is the responsibility of the regional rep to connect with the chapters in their designated area. That is one of their main responsibilities.
Absolutely, that is one of their main responsibilities. In option B, thank you for the comment. In option B, as you can see, it would become an additional responsibility of the regional rep to also carry an area of domain expertise. That's the change here. So in no way is it meant to distract from the regional representative reaching out and connecting with chapters in their regions, but it would also mean that they have a dual role. They would do that, but they would also, on the actual board of directors, carry responsibility, for example, for administration or for education or for any one of those 5 domain areas. So absolutely, your point is absolutely correct. And I know sometimes there are regions who do struggle because we have had situations where there have been regions without chapters, or of the 3 chapters that they should have, they only have 1. So we do recognize that that is the regional representative's role.
One question is, what suggestions do the NSO have for the rep?
So far, the main suggestion that has come forward, although we have not at this point consulted with that group, but so far the main suggestion that's come forward through the consultation is that it be the chair of NSO that would come on as the student representative to the board. But we're certainly open to other suggestions.
Okay, there's a comment. When I sat on the RNAO board at the beginnings of the LIN, RNAO was going to look at that. At least the LINs are population-based. I think this is regarding the LIN and chapter boundaries.
Okay, thank you for that comment. We'll certainly take that back and look at whether or not the governance subcommittee did have any conversation about that. I do know that the boundaries of the regions and chapters had been looked at in a preliminary way, and the decision was made to leave as is for now. I do also recall that at the beginning, the LINs are population-based, but when the indicators were considered, a huge defining indicator for LINs actually had to do with acute care patient population, their catchment areas for acute care. So I guess it really depends on how you look at population definitions. It wasn't residential populations.
Okay, we have a question. Is the number of IGs going to be limited? For example, the new college nurses used to be occupational health nurses. I can understand why they may want to be separate for work tasks, but so many interest groups based on scope of work may be splintering nurses.
Thank you for that question. No, there is no thinking currently, or that I'm aware of at all, that we would be looking at limiting the number of interest groups. That has not been, we do work to try to avoid, wherever possible, overlap in interest groups, and to really help to support the scope of the work that interest groups undertake. We do try to also support, and I know Home Office supports some collaboration across interest groups, where there may be some synergies across the work that's happening in interest groups, but there is no intention to be limiting the number of interest groups.
There's a question, could the mentorship of a student become a regional rep role like the MAL roles?
Thank you for that question, and I would also take that as a suggestion, because absolutely, that is when we would consider a mentorship model for a student coming on the board. That absolutely is one possibility, that the regional representative could assume that mentorship role. That is something we would need to look at. Whatever the outcome of the one member, one vote is, the phase of actually operationalizing any governance change would need to be considered to ensure a smooth transition, and of course mentorship would be one of those changes. So thank you for that suggestion and question.
There's a question, will you be inviting former participants to view and comment on the options as well?
We absolutely, at the end of every webinar, I do invite former participants to rejoin at any time. I always end with a couple couple of comments. One is because I realize it's a lot of information, that sometimes when you get off the webinar and you start talking to your colleagues, something comes to mind. Oh, I should have mentioned whatever. So I always encourage people to join again. There's no limit on how many times you can patch into the webinar. And in addition to that, we do keep emailing out reminders of when the dates are. And also, the good thing is that we have posted on the website I'll let Sarah speak to this. You've posted the previous.
We have the archived webinars are on the website, as well as this presentation deck. So if you've already participated at the beginning, we did send an email out saying that now the presentation has been changed, so you can come and listen to the webinars that you might have missed and see the updated slides.
Exactly. So, in fact, it could be, if you know any people who have participated once, and it might be good for them to come back in for one of the two remaining webinars to see how some of the feedback is actually being incorporated as some options, so into some of the options. So the invitation is going out by way of reminders. Thank you.
So we have a comment regarding the interest groups. It's the members who bring the idea forward for establishing an interest group and do so in keeping with the membership criteria, either by the bylaws or policy/procedure guidelines.
That is correct. Thank you for that comment, which is basically just speaking to the way that interest groups can be initiated. And there are, for any interest group, a minimum membership criteria, and so on. So there is a process for establishing interest groups. Absolutely. Thank you for all of these wonderful comments and questions. We're just waiting to see if there are any more in the queue, or any of you who would like to ask a question on the phone. You're welcome to do so. So seeing none and hearing no one on the phone, it looks like then we can draw our webinar to a close. I will once again reiterate the two remaining dates and times, November the 16th and 18th. So please talk it up among your colleagues and encourage them to share their thoughts. There's also an opportunity to email any comments or questions and thoughts directly to Sarah. You can see her coordinates on the screen there. And once again, it can be when you just start to wrap your head around it, not in the span of an hour, but rather begin to think about things that may be important for us to consider. Sometimes it may come to you later. So please do take advantage of that. And I want to close by basically thanking you all for being part of what I would consider a fairly fulsome exploration tonight, and your important questions. This is absolutely how we will formulate a future structure for our RNAO Board of Directors. And to remind you, because this is a change, would result in a change to a bylaw. That is exactly why it will go out in 2016 at our AGM for one member, one vote. So everyone will have an opportunity to have their say at that time. Okay, so thank you all. Have a wonderful evening and take care. Bye-bye.